Hey, this is Michael Bohm with Youth Apologetics Training. Today I'm sitting out in the truckfus, that is the half truck, half office. It is a scorching hot day in Colorado, and it is an oven in here. The state of Colorado is on fire. It's like a blazing disco inferno. And today we're going to keep talking about this, what is Wicca? And today specifically we're going to talk about magic. Okay, so we're going to get into the witchcraft side of this junk. And I did call it junk. God repeatedly throughout His Word calls witchcraft an abomination. And it is an abomination. Whenever you try to tap a spiritual force to influence the world around you, and the spiritual force is not God, that's an abomination. That is witchcraft, and it is something that God hates. All right, so let's look at it from the Wiccan perspective. What is magic? Well, I've got a few definitions here because, well, like we have seen throughout this whole series, Wiccans don't seem to agree on anything. There's just a lot of kind of an anything goes, your truth is your truth, and I've got my truth kind of religion. It's very, well, it almost has a postmodern feel to it in its own witchy kind of way. And so anyway, let's just look at some of these different definitions. Aleister Crowley, Mr. I'm the Beast 666, he quite possibly the most wicked man that has ever lived, had this to say about witchcraft. This is what he says. He says, it's the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with the will. That's fairly accurate. Another, McGregor Mathers, says it is the science of the control of the secret forces of nature. Okay, except that he's missing the point. It's not forces of nature that you're tapping into. And as we talk about these spells later on, and I'm just going to kind of talk about a few of them, I'm not going to tell you how to do them, because honestly it's silliness. It really is. It's total silliness. And if you are tapping into the quote-unquote forces of nature, secret forces of nature, really, like doing these little prescribed motions and using certain colored candles and casting a circle around yourself and invoking different gods, that's forces of nature? Are you kidding me? There's nothing, as far as the material universe goes, there is nothing that would grant you any kind of powers to influence the world around you by doing these silly rituals. You are most certainly tapping into spiritual forces, and these spiritual forces are malevolent. They want nothing more than to lead you astray, and better yet, if they can get you into the darker forms of witchcraft so that not only are you led astray, but you're hurting other people, well, that's even better. That's gravy. So, there I go ranting. Let's get back on topic. And so, the point in all of this is to make these forces bendable at your own will. So you bend these forces and cause things to happen around you. And again, I say, you are tapping into spiritual forces. They are in control, not you, not you. You are not the source of the power. And when you tap into these spiritual forces, they are not from God. And eventually you will die. We all do. 10 out of 10 people die. And we're all going to have to face our Creator. And so, is this temporary power really worth it to you? I read this earlier in the series. I want to read it again. Deuteronomy 18:9. It says, "When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. All those that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out before thee." All right. Again, 2 different times there in this scripture, God calls witchcraft an abomination. All right, so these Wiccans, I mentioned earlier the pentagram and how they have the earth, air, fire, and water at each, you got 5 points of the pentagram, or pentacle. It goes by both names. Pentacle is generally what Wiccans call it, but some groups call it a pentagram, and some groups call it both, either or, depending on if it's right side up or upside down. Oh, by the way, I might as well throw this in there. A right side up pentacle is generally what Wiccans use. Some of them turn it upside down. And every one of you knows, you've seen that star in a circle upside down with the pointing down. And you oftentimes see that like on the cover of movies that are satanic in nature, and you see them on a bunch of long-haired, head-banging rocker guys walking around with shirts that have pentagrams on them and stuff like that. Yeah, I used to hang out with guys like that. I used to be amongst guys like that I never wore shirts like that. I hated that stuff even when I wasn't Christian. But anyway, I think God was already tapping on my shoulder back then. I knew there was something wrong with it. But good grief, I get off topic. The upside down star, that pentacle within the circle, right? Generally, Satanists use that. Now, I mentioned earlier there's the 5-pointed star that the Wiccans use. And each point has a phase of matter, is how they refer to it, at each point. So you have earth, air, fire, and water, and you have one of the points, the one at the top, if it's right side up and it's pointing up, is ether, or spirit. When a Wiccan turns that upside down, that usually means, but not always, that they are a 2nd degree witch. They do have first, second, and third degrees, which I may or may not talk about. But the upside down one, generally to them, means that it's a 2nd degree witch. Not always. But to a Satanist, they turn it upside down, and this causes spirit to be at the bottom, to them least important, and fire and earth to be at the top. And fire is supposed to represent passion and power, and earth is supposed to represent earthly goods and prosperity. So we see where their heart's at. Make sense?